الرحمن الرحيم. وكذلك أخذ ربك إذا أخذ القرى وهي ظالمة إن أخذه أليم شديد. إن في ذلك لآية لمن خاف عذاب الآخرة. ذلك يوم مجموع له الناس وذلك يوم مشهود. وما نؤخره إلا لأجل معدود. يوم يأتي لا تكلم نفس إلا بإذنه فمنهم شقي وسعيد. فأما الذين شقوا ففي النار لهم فيها زفير وشهيق خالدين فيها ما دامت السماوات والأرض إلا ما شاء ربك إن ربك فعال لما يريد. وأما الذين سعدوا ففي الجنة وأما الذين سعدوا ففي الجنة خالدين فيها ما دامت السماوات والأرض إلا ما شاء ربك عطاء غير مجذوذ. فلا تك في مرية مما يعبد هؤلاء ما يعبدون إلا كما يعبد آباؤهم من قبل وإنا لموفوهم نصيبهم غير منقوص. ولقد آتينا موسى الكتاب فاختلف فيه ولولا كلمة سبقت من ربك لقضي بينهم وإنهم لفي شك منه مريب وإن كلا لما ليوفينهم ربك أعمالهم إنه بما يعملون خبير فاستقم كما أمرت ومن تاب معك ولا تطغوا إنه بما تعملون بصير ولا تركنوا إلى الذين ظلموا فتمسكم النار وما لكم من دون الله من أولياء وما لكم من دون الله من أولياء ثم لا تنصرون وأقم الصلاة طرفي النهار وزلفا من الليل إن الحسنات يذهبن السيئات ذلك ذكرى للذاكرين واصبر فإن الله لا يضيع أجر المحسنين فلولا كان من القرون من قبلكم أولو بقية ينهون عن الفساد في الأرض إلا قليلا ممن أنجينا منهم واتبع الذين ظلموا ما أترفوا فيه وكانوا مجرمين وما كان ربك ليهلك القرى بظلم وأهلها مصلحون ولو شاء ربك لجعل الناس أمة واحدة ولا يزالون مختلفين إلا من رحم ربك ولذلك خلقهم وتمت كلمة ربك لأملأن جهنم من الجنة والناس أجمعين وكلا نقص عليك من أنباء الرسل ما نثبت به فؤادك وجاءك في هذه الحق وموعظة وذكرى للمؤمنين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Since we opened our doors in the year 2000, our community has grown, not only in its numbers, but also its services, diversity, and scope. In order to continue this growth and prepare ourselves for the future, we have embarked on an ambitious journey to construct a purpose-built facility that will better serve followers of the Ahlul Bayt in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. The new masjid complex will feature prayer and lecture halls, classrooms, outdoor and indoor recreational space, and dedicated facilities for burial preparation. Located in central Fairfax County, Virginia, minutes from George Mason University and close to major highways, the new center will be accessible for anyone living in the DMV area. With the grace of Allah, this facility will serve as a religious home and anchor for our community. It will be a source of spiritual rejuvenation, guidance, community building, and outreach. After years of preparation and prayers, we have submitted our plans to the county and will inshallah begin construction soon. We ask you to join us in this endeavor however you can. First, we ask for your du'as. Second, we ask you to enrich our community and programs with your participation and volunteering. And finally, we ask for your financial contributions to make this masjid and community center a reality.
إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المهتدين.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين فاطر السماوات والأرضين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we commemorate the tragic event of the martyrdom of our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad ibn Ali al-Baqir alayhim as-salatu was-salam. Imam Muhammad al-Baqir was not just the Imam of the Shia and the followers of Ahlul Bayt, but he was a towering person in the history of Islam. According to a prominent non-Muslim scholar of Islam, the present-day landscape of Islamic thought is largely on the side of the Shi'i school of thought. Now, this requires some explanation. After the Prophet's death, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there were two general approaches to Islam that came to the surface. One was the approach that said that this is a religious community whose identity and whose relationships are based upon a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore they are rooted in truth. They are rooted in genuine knowledge. And therefore Islam must always strive to the ideal, to bringing the individual spiritual life of every person to perfection, and to bringing human society to perfection. And this is why the promise of Islam is that this deen shall spread لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ, such that it will triumph over all other beliefs and all religion. This view of Islam is the view of Islam of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam. That Islam as a religious and a spiritual identity is first and foremost about ideals and about always improving our piety, our practice, our beliefs, our morals, such that we resemble Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family, and that we accomplish their goals and fulfill their mission. We live their values in our life. The other view of Islam, which was represented by the Khulafa, is that after the Prophet, that direct connection between humanity and the heavens has come to an end. And nobody is ma'asum after the Prophet. And therefore there is no genuine or 100% authentic knowledge that is accessible to people after the Prophet. Therefore, we cannot accomplish ideals. All we can do is have a consensus or a human effort to do the best we can. The understanding of what the teachings of Islam represent will not be genuine teachings or true teachings, but they will be the best human effort through ijtihad, through ra'i, through qiyas. Ijtihad is scholarly exertion. Ra'i is personal opinion. Qiyas is analogical reasoning. These are the means by which the school of Khulafa said that we are going to try to get the best guess, the best understanding that we are humanly capable of. But we cannot claim that this is the genuine teaching of the Prophet. All we can claim is that this is the best that we are capable of understanding. So these were the two main differences between the school of Ahlul Bayt and the school of the Khulafa right after the death of the Prophet. If you read the history of the discussions in Saqifa, regardless of who said what and what were the Ansar trying to do and what were those few Muhajirin who came trying to do, but just look at the discussion between the Muhajirin and the Ansar reported in different sources in Saqifa, and what you will find is that all of the discussion was about what is expedient. What will the Arab tribes submit to? How will political stability and social stability be able to be achieved? This is not a discussion about religious principles. It is not a discussion about who has the greater knowledge or who has the authentic knowledge of Islam or who has the taqwa and the adala and the practice of Islam. It was a discussion about politics and a discussion about social and political convenience. This is the overt description of what was taking place in Saqifa and after Saqifa. So initially, the school of Ahlul Bayt was not about idealism so much as it was about practical decision making. Practical from the perspective of those people who were making the decisions. Now, as a follower of Ahlul Bayt, with the hindsight of 1400 years of Islamic history, I would say, and I think many fair-minded students would say, this was not even a practical school of thought. It created so many problems and so many diversions and so many deviations within Islamic history that we are still suffering those diversions and those deviations until today. But in the mindset of those people who followed the Khulafa, they thought it was a practical decision. Abu Bakr was a senior companion of the Prophet. He was kind of a compromise candidate that the Ansar, or a number of the Ansar, were willing to accept. The Muhajirin were willing to compromise with. The other Arab tribes were able to consolidate their loyalty around him. And then Umar was a decisive military ruler, and Uthman was a member of the prominent family of Banu Umayyah, and therefore he had influence among Quraysh, and he was able to extend his authority over the expanding empire of the Muslim world. So these practical decisions, they may not really have been practical, but the basis for making those decisions, the belief of those people who made those decisions and those people who followed them, was that this is the best that we as human beings can accomplish. So this is a very wide gulf, that all that exists for the Muslims after the Prophet is what is imperfect, what is a human effort. And the spread of Islam is not going to be the eradication of all false answers or wrong answers. It's not going to be the eradication of all evil or the perfection of humanity, because how is that possible when there is no ma'soom? It is going to be the spread of the Muslim empire, the Muslim political authority over every corner of the world. And that is the success of Islam. The futuhat, the conquests, are the demonstration of the triumph of Islam. And on the other hand, you have the school of Ahlul Bayt, which says that just expanding your territory or sending your army to different frontiers does not mean that truth has come to all of those lands. It doesn't mean that Islam has reached, and that Islam in that form which has come to the frontiers and the new territories will be able to solve all of humanity's spiritual and intellectual and moral and societal problems and evils. What a wide gulf. Now let's come back to the statement that I said earlier, which is that to a large extent, the present landscape of Islam has turned its back on that belief of the madrasa of the khulafa, the school of thought of khulafa. And to a large extent, it has come to agreement with the school of Ahlul Bayt. Well, let's take a few examples. The first is that all Muslims, with the exception of just a small number of scholars who can be counted on the fingertips, and they are so few out of the thousands and thousands of scholars from all schools of thought within Muslim history, they are so few that they can be discounted. We can ignore, and we can even go so far as to say that without any disagreement, all Muslims agree that there will be a Mahdi, a rightly guided and a rightly guiding ruler of the Muslims and leader of the Muslims. May Allah hasten his reappearance. And that he will bring the triumph of Islam by giving the convincing argument against other religions, such that Christianity and Judaism, which are revealed religions and divine religions, they will also submit to Islam. And the other religious or non-religious people of the world, they also will have an exposure to the true proof of Islam, and then they will not have any excuse to reject the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so all people of a clean heart and a clear conscience in the world, they will accept Islam at the hands of the Mahdi. And that is how he will be able to spread justice through every corner of the earth. Now imagine this belief. Is it compatible with the logic and the decisions of the followers of Khulafa immediately after the death of the Prophet? Or is it in line with the teachings and the beliefs of Ahlul Bayt and the followers of Ahlul Bayt? And just, we simplified, we said that Ahlul Bayt focused on what is right and what is ideal. Look at the history of Saqifa and look at the history of the arguments presented by Imam Ali alayhi salam. The arguments presented by Imam Ali that are recorded even in the general history of the Muslims, not the history written by and recorded by the followers of Ahlul Bayt, which is authentic history, but even that partial or incomplete history that has been recorded by the general body of Muslims. They say the argument of Imam Ali, the argument that was rejected by Khulafa, and the argument that was rejected by the followers of Khulafa was a legitimist argument. Legitimist meaning that we have a haqq, we have a right, and this right should not be ignored. As the family of the Prophet, as the heirs of the Prophet, as the people who have been entrusted with the leadership of the Muslim Ummah by the Prophet, as those who are qualified for this leadership by virtue of our knowledge and by virtue of our piety, we have a haqq. So the Muslims did not agree that the Imams were ma'soom. The non-followers of Ahlul Bayt among the Muslims did not agree that the Imams were ma'soom. They did not agree that the Prophet had made a specific will and wasiyah in favor of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and then in favor of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and the later Imams. May Allah's peace and blessings be upon them. They didn't agree with this. But nobody can doubt that the claim made by Imam Ali, whether you want to accept that claim as the followers of Ahlul Bayt did, or you want to reject that claim as the followers of the Khulafa did, that is a separate question. But the claim that is being made, whether you accept the claim or you reject the claim that is being made by Imam Ali, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, is a claim that is based on haqq, a legitimist claim, a claim that is based on what is right, what is correct. So right here we see very clearly in history, and no amount of censorship or hiding the history has been able to eliminate this fact. The claim made by Saqifa and the followers of Saqifa was a claim made on the basis of expediency, and the claim made by Ahlul Bayt and the followers of Ahlul Bayt was a claim that was made on the basis of haqq. Now, the question arises that according to the logic of Saqifa, if Allah says that the leadership of the Muslim community should be chosen by consultation and on the basis of expedience and on the basis of tribal agreement or on the basis of military power, then how is that ever going to lead to a Mahdi who will be able to fulfill that promise, which is the eradication of all evil and all injustice? And if you believe, as all Muslims do, that this Mahdi will be from the followers, not just from the followers, but from the family of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from the descendants of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then how is it possible to establish a Khalifa without the participation or the consultation even of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam? Not a single member of Banu Hashim was involved. Forget Imam Ali alayhi salam. Forget Lady Fatima salamullahi alayha. Forget Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. But not even Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet, Abdullah ibn Abbas, or any other member of Banu Hashim was consulted or involved in the decision of who is going to succeed the Prophet. If you believe that the Mahdi is going to be from Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet, from Banu Hashim, from the descendants of the Prophet, then of course Ahlul Bayt have to be front and center in making the decision of who is to be the guide and the leader of the Muslim Ummah. So the point that I want to establish is that we see that in some sense, initially after the Prophet, the logic which resulted in Khilafat of Abu Bakr and Umar ibn al-Khattab and Uthman ibn Affan was an expedient logic, a practical logic, that this is what is going to give stability for the Muslim world. But eventually what won out in the Muslim world, those ahadith began to circulate, that the salvation of the Muslim Ummah in this world and in the hereafter is going to come at the hands of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam. It's not going to come at the hands of the Khulafa. And the logic which resulted in the Khulafa after Saqifa, this was a victory for the principle established and espoused by Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wasalam. Even though the majority of the Muslim community, even today, does not believe in the Mahdi being Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. They still do believe that whoever the Mahdi is, he will be a descendant of Lady Fatima salamullahi alayha and a descendant of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And this itself, and the belief that he will be the leader of the Muslim Ummah and Prophet Isa as a Nabi and as a Prophet will do his prayer in congregation behind Imam Mahdi. And Imam Mahdi will establish all of the precepts and the teachings of Islam and eradicate all evil and all injustice. This is a belief of all of the Muslims. And this is based on the Shi'i logic. The small differences in the belief about Imam Mahdi alayhi salam that exist between the Shi'i and the Sunni communities, these are a matter of some details. But the logic of Mahdaviyyat, the logic of the belief in Imam Mahdi won the day among the Muslim Ummah and scholarship. The logic of Saqifa was defeated, just as the physical Khilafah also came to an end. Today there is no Khalifatul Muslimin. Just a few years ago there was a short-lived attempt to create a Khilafah by Daesh, and that was rejected not by the Shia but even by all self-respecting Sunni Muslims and Muslims of all schools of thought. There is no Khilafah today. But the logic of Khilafah, the ideal of Khilafah was defeated long before the physical Khilafah came to an end with the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire in the first quarter of the 20th century in 1924. So this was one victory of the logic of Shia Islam. Now, who was responsible for this victory? This was the role of Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. That after Karbala, when the entirety of the Muslim Ummah was shaken by the greatest tragedy that befell humanity, before or after, the martyrdom and the brutal suppression of the most near and dear and beloved members of the family of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For 30 years after Karbala, for 34, 35 years after Karbala, Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam planted certain seeds, very few seeds, that he was able to plant of remembrance of dua, of remembrance of the moral values of Islam. But then it was Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam who spread the true teachings of Islam in all corners of the Muslim world. And some of those ways in which Imam Baqir alayhi salam influenced the thought of the Muslim world, they're not visible to us because people were not able to always publicly acknowledge what they learned from Imam Muhammad Baqir. It was still the government of the Umayyads, who were enemies of Ahlul Bayt, who tried to marginalize and suppress Ahlul Bayt. But imagine if the majority of the Muslims knew the ahadith that the Mahdi will be a descendant of Lady Fatima salamullahi alayha in Karbala, at the time of Karbala, could Karbala have taken place? Absolutely not. If the majority of Muslims had heard these ahadith and believed these ahadith, that the true leader of the Muslim world will be a descendant of Lady Fatima, then Imam Hussein alayhi salam was the heir and the descendant of Lady Fatima. Neither Imam Hassan alayhi salam would be deprived of his right as the leader of the Muslims, nor Imam Hussein could be deprived of his right as the leader of the Muslims. So there was a period after Karbala of quiet. And then there was a period in the time of Imam Baqir alayhi salam when he found an opportunity that was not given by Allah to the Imams who came before, to be able to spread the teachings of Islam. And that's why we see that now among the majority of the Muslims, the ahadith circulate that the Mahdi will be the heir of the family of the Prophet and the descendant of Lady Fatima. This is not a small historical detail. This comes to the essence of what is Islam. Because what is Islam if not the promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the true belief and the true message of liberation from this material world and from the suffering and the evil of this material world is to be given to humanity. What is Islam if not that promise of liberation from evil and from a physical or a material life? And that is the message that is held by the Ma'asum. That is the message that is conveyed by the Mahdi. May Allah hasten his appearance. So it was Imam Baqir alayhi salam who was able to spread that teaching. And this is also why the animosity against our Imam was so severe. Because just one example I mentioned, but so many other examples, just to get an idea of the influence of Imam Baqir, all we need to know is that his title, by which he was known not among his followers and among his Shia, but among the Muslims, was al-Baqir. And al-Baqir comes from Baqirul Ulum, the one who splits open the seeds of knowledge. When you look at a small seed, it looks insignificant. But then when that seed splits open and it puts down roots in the ground, you will see that a very productive plant will come from which you will get many fruits. Or that seed might grow into a mighty tree that will give you fruit, that will give you shade, that will give you so many other blessings and benefits. So Imam alayhi salam was known as Baqirul Ulum. This is how we can see the extent of his blessings and his influence among the Muslims of his time. Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam was the one who corrected many of those false beliefs that were spread among the majority of Muslims. So that although they did not recognize the full right of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the family of the Prophet, but they now believed in the ismah of the Prophet. Those ahadith that had been circulated by the Umayyads, which said the Prophet is just a man, and he gives you a message from Allah, but he doesn't know the worldly affairs. This was a belief, and there are ahadith still surviving among the hadith collections of Ahlul Sunnah, which reflect this false belief that was spread by the Umayyads. Prophet Muhammad, he doesn't know about worldly affairs, he just knows about religious affairs. Allah sent him with the message. What does he know about astronomy? What does he know about agriculture? What does he know about who should be the Khalifa or the leader of the Muslims? Imam Baqir alayhi salam corrected those beliefs. Now if you ask the average Muslim, Sunni or Shia, is Prophet Muhammad ma'asum? Is Prophet Muhammad's advice about worldly affairs just as binding and insightful as his guidance about religious affairs? Then that Muslim, without knowing the history of these debates and these deviations, will say, of course, Prophet Muhammad is our inspiration for all of our affairs, worldly and spiritual and religious and political and societal, whatever it might be, whatever Prophet Muhammad said, that is our standard. Where did that belief come from? It didn't come from the Khulafa. This was the effort of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam, and Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam was the Imam who brought this effort, and the animosity of the Umayyads came from this very source. According to some narrations, it was during the Khilafah of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik that the Caliph Hisham at that time became jealous of the Imam and his influence. And although he had the wealth, he had the army, he had the political and the military power, he saw that Imam Baqir alayhi salam had the love of the Muslims and the moral authority that the king and the caliph of the Muslims lacked. And so he caused Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam to be poisoned. And what a tragic event it was. Imam Muhammad Baqir was alive in the time of Karbala. He was 4 years old and he was present in Karbala when his father Imam Zainul Abidin was sick and when his grandfather Imam Hussein alayhi salam was martyred. He was one of those who was made a captive. And I can only imagine that on his deathbed, as he was poisoned and his body was being destroyed by the poison that had been administered to him in Medina, as he was surrounded by his family and by Imam Ja'far Sadiq and his other family members who were with him, that Imam Baqir alayhi salam would have remembered that day of Ashura to which he was a witness as a child. And he would have said, "Oh, my grandfather Imam Hussein, very soon I am going to be joining you." But what an uncomparable tragedy it was. What a calamity it was to see Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam in Karbala. It wasn't poison that caused the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, but it was the attack from all sides when he was surrounded by his enemy, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam was attacked, in the words of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam, as an innocent animal is hunted by a cruel gang of people throwing their weapons and causing him injury from all sides. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam's son Imam Baqir was a witness to that tragedy of Karbala. And as he was on his deathbed, the prayers of Imam Baqir, the thoughts of Imam Baqir must have gone to the plains of Karbala. And it was in those circumstances that Imam Baqir made his final wasiyah to Imam Ja'far Sadiq. One of the words of that wasiyah were that, "O my son, O Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, for 10 years after my death, make sure that you arrange a majlis in Mina where you speak of my martyrdom and of the oppression suffered by Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salatu wassalam." That wasiyah was so that the life and the sacrifice of Imam Baqir, the memory of Imam Zainul Abidin, and most importantly, the memory of the tragedy of Karbala would be kept alive in the memory and in the hearts of the Muslim. This was the wasiyah of Imam Muhammad Baqir. May Allah keep that remembrance alive always in our hearts so long as we live. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إلهي عظم البلاء وبرح الخفاء وانكشف الغطاء وانقطع الرجاء وضاقت الأرض ومنعت السماء وأنت المستعان وإليك المشتكى وعليك المعول في الشدة والرخاء. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد أولي الأمر الذين فرضت علينا طاعتهم وعرفتنا بذلك منزلتهم. ففرج عنا بحقهم فرجا عاجلا قريبا كلمح البصر أو هو أقرب. يا محمد يا علي يا علي يا محمد اكفياني فإنكما كافيان وانصراني فإنكما ناصران. يا مولانا يا صاحب الزمان الغوث 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 أدركني 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 الساعة 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 العجلة العجلة العجل يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. هم النور نور الله جل جلاله، هم التين والزيتون والشفع والوتر، مهابط وحي الله خزان علمه، ميامين في أبياتهم نزل الذكر، وأسماؤهم مكتوبة فوق عرشه ومكنونة من قبل أن يخلق الذر، ولولاهم لم يخلق الله آدما ولا كان زيد في الوجود ولا عمرو. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيهة عند الله اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي أيها الشهيد، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن الحسين، يا زين العابدين، يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله، وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي، أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وصي الحسن والخلفاء الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. أعظم الله أجرك سيدي ومولاي يا صاحب الزمان بشهادة جدك الإمام الباقر عليه السلام دار خلت من آل بيت محمد سحقا لها من دار أغرى الزمان بني عمومتهم وقد بشهادة إمامنا الباقر اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب ومهموم ومظلوم ومصاب بوباء وبلاء بحرمة محمد وآل محمد بشهادة إمامنا باقر العلم صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. فرج وعجل فرج إمام زماننا صلوات الله وسلامه عليه واجعلنا من أنصاره من المرضيين عنده بأعمالنا الصالحة. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد واقض حاجة كل محتاج واشف كل مريض وفرج عن كل مكروب ومهموم ومظلوم ونج كل مصاب ببلاء ووباء بحرمة محمد وآل محمد. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات والشهداء السعداء، رحم الله من يقرأ سورة الفاتحة تسبقها الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم أئمة الهدى، السلام عليكم أهل التقوى، السلام عليكم أيها الحجج على أهل الدنيا، السلام عليكم أيها القوام في البرية بالقسط، السلام عليكم أهل الصفوة، السلام عليكم آل رسول الله، السلام عليكم أهل النجوى. أشهد أنكم قد بلغتم ونصحتم وصبرتم في ذات الله، وكذبتم وأسيء إليكم فغفرتم. وأشهد أنكم الأئمة الراشدون المهتدون، وأن طاعتكم مفروضة، وأن قولكم الصدق، وأنكم دعوتم فلم تجابوا، وأمرتم فلم تطاعوا، وأنكم دعائم الدين وأركان الأرض، لم تزالوا بعين الله ينسخكم من أصلاب كل مطهر، وينقلكم من أرحام المطهرات. لم تدنسكم الجاهلية الجهلا، ولم تشرك فيكم فتن الأهواء. طبتم وطاب منبتكم، من بكم علينا ديان الدين، فجعلكم في بيوت أذن الله أن ترفع ويذكر فيها اسمه، وجعل صلاتنا عليكم رحمة لنا وكفارة لذنوبنا، إذ اختاركم الله لنا وطيب خلقنا بما من علينا من ولايتكم، وكنا عنده مسمين بعلمكم، معترفين بتصديقنا إياكم. وهذا مقام من أسرف وأخطأ واستكان وأقر بما جنى، ورجى بمقامه الخلاص، وأن يستنقذه بكم مستنقذ الهلك من الردى. فكونوا لي شفعاء، فقد وفدت إليكم إذ رغب عنكم أهل الدنيا، واتخذوا آيات الله هزوا واستكبروا عنها. يا من هو قائم لا يسهو ودائم لا يلهو ومحيط بكل شيء، لك المن بما وفقتني وعرفتني بما أقمتني عليه، إذ صد عنه عبادك وجهلوا معرفته واستخفوا بحقه ومالوا إلى سواه، فكانت المنة منك علي مع أقوام خصصتهم بما خصصتني به، فلك الحمد إذ كنت عندك في مقامي هذا مذكورا مكتوبا، فلا تحرمني ما رجوت ولا تخيبني فيما دعوت، بحرمة محمد وآله الطاهرين. وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم أئمة الهدى ورحمة الله وبركاته. أستودعكم الله وأقرأ عليكم السلام. آمنا بالله وبالرسول وبما جئتم به ودللتم عليه، اللهم فاكتبنا مع الشاهدين.
Since we opened our doors in the year 2000, our community has grown, not only in its numbers, but also its services, diversity, and scope. In order to continue this growth and prepare ourselves for the future, we have embarked on an ambitious journey to construct a purpose-built facility that will better serve followers of the Ahlul Bayt in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. The new masjid complex will feature prayer and lecture halls, classrooms, outdoor and indoor recreational space, and dedicated facilities for burial preparation. Located in central Fairfax County, Virginia, minutes from George Mason University and close to major highways, the new center will be accessible for anyone living in the DMV area. With the grace of Allah, this facility will serve as a religious home and anchor for our community. It will be a source of spiritual rejuvenation, guidance, community building, and outreach. After years of preparation and prayers, we have submitted our plans to the county and will inshallah begin construction soon. We ask you to join us in this endeavor however you can. First, we ask for your du'as. Second, we ask you to enrich our community and programs with your participation and volunteering. And finally, we ask for your financial contributions to make this masjid and community center a reality.
إنما يعمر مساجد الله من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وأقام الصلاة وآتى الزكاة ولم يخش إلا الله فعسى أولئك أن يكونوا من المهتدين.
السلام عليك يا حجة الله في أرضه. السلام عليك يا عين الله في خلقه. السلام عليك يا نور الله الذي يهتدي به المهتدون ويفرج به عن المؤمنين. السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف. السلام عليك أيها الولي الناصر. السلام عليك أيها المهذب الخائف. السلام عليك أيها الولي الناصر. السلام عليك يا سفينة النجاة. السلام عليك يا أين الحياة يا أين الحياة.
سلامي للحبيب وبهجة وآية. سلام يا العطور والوان وزهار. سلام يا الغروب ورجعة طيار. سلام اللي ويسلم على النهار. سلامي للحبيب بهجة أنوار. سلام يا العطور والوان وزهار. سلام يا الغروب ورجعة طيار. سلام اللي ويسلم على النهار. حبيبي يا نسيم الشوق. حبيبي يا عز معشوق. أحبك يا بعيد بقد مسافاتي. أحبك والسلام لمعاناتي. سلام سلام يا مهدي. سلام 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 يا مهدي. سلام 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 يا مهدي. سلام